with men and women and couples during that time. And I have learned so much, because when you teach about Tantra and sexuality, then everybody comes and shares their deepest, darkest secrets with you. And it was such an honor to get to know people's journeys of what was going on, and to be able to support them and facilitate them through that. And then I have since gone into a one-on-one coaching practice and couples coaching. So I work a lot with couples, or I'm working with men and helping them through all different kinds of things, whether it's their life or their business, or it is also their relationships. And the relationship is often a thing that they come to me initially wanting to work with. And then we often will span out and touch on other areas of their life as well. So I would say I've been doing it for about 15 years now.
Amazing. So then the topic that we're really going to go into is something that I'm experiencing too, because I'm also working with couples, which is polarity. And it's a very, very interesting topic right now, because right now, especially in the next kind of generation, in the millennials, we have a global phenomenon coming on where young people are actually sort of many are trying to get out of polarity altogether. It's such an exasperating topic for people, right? You know, it can be so challenging. And so an obvious way out is to just try and avoid it. And people of all generations, I think it's something that can draw people in. It can trigger people. It has a lot of judgment. And yet there's gold there. So do you want to talk a little bit about working with polarity?
Oh my God, yes. So it's really interesting of like bringing in this message of like either reviving the polarity or bringing in the polarity in a relationship and having that masculine feminine dynamic, because a lot of people have the context of masculine feminine of our parents or our grandparents, where there wasn't a whole lot of freedom and there wasn't a whole lot of respect in that. And so it was more of like a codependent relationship. So when I'm speaking about it, there's so many people that will bring that old understanding into the message that I'm giving. And it's constantly something that I'm engaging with, saying, look, we're keeping some things of the old, but we're adding love, respect, freedom, like a healthy interdependence, and so much more in that. Like, it's, we're not coming to each other because we need each other, but we're coming out of a full sense of completion in ourselves and wanting to engage with that. And a couple of years ago, I gave a lecture. I was back home visiting my parents for Christmas. And when I go, I will often like do some kind of teaching or something. And I gave a lecture on the masculine and feminine dynamic. And so there were people there that were my generation. And then there was people there that were my parents' generation. So it was amazing to have that collection. And at the end, there was such a beautiful discussion between the older women and the younger one. And they were saying, like, because they were just like giving this, like, really this nod throughout. And they're like, you know, thank you so much. It's reminded me of things that I know in my heart, but I've kind of forgotten in my 30 years of marriage. And, you know, I haven't really been practicing this. And they were speaking to the younger ones and they were saying, you're so lucky to learn this now and to learn it from this context. I wish I had known that, because what I find is this polarity really keeps the spark, or it brings the spark to the relationship. It keeps that. So especially for people who are like into Tantra and that polarity and that attraction and that passion and wanting those things, this is something that can contribute to that.
Right. I mean, you know, like a battery can't exist without two poles, right? And so this is one of the parts of the alchemy of Taoism as well as Tantra, that you actually need to generate two polarities to create energy. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a male body, two male bodies, two female bodies, or a male and female, right? You like, that's why classically you see a lot of gay couples that also polarized. You can tell this one's running the feminine energy, this one's running the masculine energy. So it's really about running masculine and feminine energy. And, you know, I see so many people who are trying to avoid that and just be equal, but we're throwing away a lot of gold with that. And you're right, there's also so much kind of old school conditioning around it, like women should do this and men should do that, and it gets about control and domination and ugly things like that. And yet there it is. There's a relativity that Tantra and Taoism have always pointed to and talk about dancing with. So it's such a difficult topic to go into, and right, you know, you're gonna
It really is, yeah.
on the internet when you dare to mention it.
Yeah,
And
it's brutal. But I, you know, when you spoke about like it, because people want this 50-50. Now, some people, like, that's really the kind of relationship that they want. They have a 50-50 kind of sexuality and they really enjoy that. And some people, they go into 50-50 because it's what's safe, because it's like, you know, we're equal here. We've got both of our roles, we know, and we're both contributing to this. And so the thing is that to be able to have a relationship of what we're speaking about here, where there is this dance between the masculine and feminine, there has to be trust. There has to be safety. Like, all of those things need to be there in order for this to exist. Without that, you need to first go to the 50-50, and then this is the next step. You can't really miss it. And I think, you know, sometimes my partner and I will be in the 50-50, and then we go into this masculine and feminine dance and polarity. And sometimes we come back to the 50-50. So it's kind of like dancing and moving between it, because I'm a woman with a really strong masculine side to myself. And my partner is not feminine so much as he is yin. Like, he has a lot of that yin energy. And so that's our natural tendency. And of course that's going to play out at times as well.
Justine, let's just define things. There's a great question coming up here. For those who are new to all this languaging, we're just leaping in because we talk about it all the time. Let's break it down. So first of all, can you kind of define what polarity is and a little bit about, say, masculine energy and feminine energy? So we start with our building blocks.
Okay. And I just saw the question too, which is a great question. I'm not sure how we're going to answer it. So let's see what comes.
Let's start with the building blocks.
Yeah. So let's start. Okay. So we have the masculine. So with masculine, I think more of direction and purpose and principles. I think of success. I think of competition and ambition. When I'm in my masculine, that's when that is coming forth. When I think of my feminine, I feel my emotions. I'm in the flow. I'm not really functioning in a linear way. I feel more expansive. There's a lot of energy when I'm in the feminine. There's cooperation, connection, communication, relationship, beauty. Those are some of the feminine values. And it's really clear. I want to really make this clear that it's not men and women. Like, we're speaking about the masculine and feminine. And as I just referenced, both of these parts in me when I'm in my masculine or when I'm in my feminine. And like, and the so feminine.
Then the relationship between them. So we've got like focus and directionality and boom, boom, boom. And then we've got like flow and feel and sense. So let's talk also about those two together in relationship and also in sex, because I think that's a juicy part of it, right?
Yeah. So then we can talk about, like, you know, the woman can bring a lot of this energy and like in her orgasms, and like they have said, for especially for a man who's beginning in Tantra, like the depth of the woman's orgasm will impact the depth of his orgasm because she's bringing in that energy. And then the man can direct it. Now the woman can as well, or the masculine can then direct and channel the energy. So it's like building it and expanding it, and then it goes in that direction. But we could also say, like, the one to surrender is something of the feminine, and then to lead is the masculine. So to dominate is in the masculine. Then we come out with that in the sexuality of being taken and the one who is taking.
The first thing I learned in Dutch was "gooi me op een bed en nemen," which means throw me to the bed and take me. And, you know, like, as a woman, it's taken me many years of Tantra to reclaim that part, because, you know, the thing is, when I was younger, I was so much taught it's not safe to surrender to the masculine because the men all want sex and they'll attack you, rape you, you know, it's this dangerous masculine sexuality. And so I grew up in a world of like, be like a man. I was even in the army, can you believe? I went to a boys' boarding school, and I was in the army. I was a lance corporal. I ran around with a big gun. And yeah, that's pre-tantra me. And by the age of 20, I was pretty celibate, like I was safe and I was in my masculine and I could fire a gun, but I had lost all my sexuality. I was kind of over sex. And then I landed in the world of tantra and realized that I had lost something that is so natural to me as a woman, which is the desire to surrender. So I think it's helpful to see that it's quite a charged topic, because there's an unsafe submission where we're forced to submit to masculine domination, and there's a lot of it in the world. And then we transition through our journey and we want to reach a place where there's surrender to masculine guidance, which is through choice with consciousness. And that is so beautiful. And that's the gold that we don't want to throw away, right? We want to have the experience of being in a woman's body. And actually, I experienced that men on the other side, men have been told, oh, you're all potential rapists. And so men are kind of trying to neutralize their force and not approach a woman for a date anymore. And, they're also trying to hold back on that masculine. And it's a great loss. I experienced that tantric men that can reclaim their yang are really fulfilled to do that. I think it's worth seeing. It's also not that safe for men. There's a big risk in approaching a woman, right?
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of interviews with men in the past several months. And one of the things I've been asking them recently is, what are the challenges of being a man in modern times? And it keeps coming back to around sexuality. And so they're like, there's so many mixed messages, like you want us soft, but you want us dominant, and when to do it. And like, then also feeling shamed for having sexual desire or expressing sexual desire and feeling like there's something wrong with them for it. And so this is a lot of the work that I'm doing with men, is to like reclaim the sexuality and also to work with their own boundaries. Cause I've heard multiple things from men. One, it's around like, some women want consent before every action. And then there's other women who are like really turned off by asking for consent for every action. So how to navigate that, and then having their own boundaries, because something that I've heard from numerous men is like, just because I'm a man, then the women expect that I'm going to want to have sex, and I don't. And so being able to communicate that in a respectful, loving way as well. So this is something that I work a lot with men around of how to navigate these boundaries.
Mm-hmm. So what would you guide men in if they're, like when they were younger, they probably experienced their natural masculine approaching women. Then they had that kind of rebound of the Me Too movement, and they were like, whoa, hang on. And now they're in a place where they're in that confusion. What's the first step for them to take? What do you think they need to work on?
Well, one, I first identify the beliefs that they have around masculinity, around women, around sexuality. So pulling all of those out so we know what's inside of them and the things that might be holding them back. And then also like, okay, what would you want to do? Like, so they can get in touch with what feels good for them. Because as we spoke about at the beginning of this talk, like, we have different desires. Some people really like the 50-50 and some people want to do that. And so if they want to be a man that takes initiative and engages with that, then first let's get clear in that. And then let's get clear about their beliefs that hold them back, and then coaching them on how to do that. And a lot of it's going to be around like communicating and asking. So for instance, they could talk to a woman and ask her of like, how do you feel around the consent topic? Like, do you like it when a man, asks before he makes another move, or do you like it when he leads and then he feels you? What is your preference around this? And so to open up a discussion around it to see how it is that she likes to engage.
Mm-hmm. And, actually the topic of trust came up. And I think that's something to remember, that maybe at the beginning, the woman wants more consent and she wants to have more of a voice in how things are going. But actually over time, if she starts to trust you, then that consent, she'll probably be happy to let it go, right? But trust isn't just there. It's something that we can build together.
Yeah. And I think like if a man wants to go there too, of bringing up the topic of like, how often do you have a tendency to go into pleasing mode or to go into fawning mode, and to like really talk about this explicitly. I'll talk about this with a client before I start working. Like, do you have a tendency to hand over your power? Like if I give you a reflection, are you going to swallow it without even digesting? Like, hey, does this fit for me? And
Mhm.
so, and do you have a tendency to please somebody who is a teacher or a therapist, because I want to know in what ways you might hand over your power so that I can give it back. And so to
Mhm.
have a conversation so that they know each other's tendencies and can support each other in that empowerment.
So it's good to talk about power here, because I think we tend to think that if you are in a role of surrendering, that it's more powerless. I think we have a lot of confusion between surrender and submission, right? Submission is like when someone's dominating and forcing you to give up your power, kind of like many of our governments are doing right now. Whereas Whereas surrender is something that's earned, right? I do a lot of salsa. I'm here in Central America. It's interesting how big polarity is part of the culture through dance here, bachata and salsa. And there's something that, like you can't have a salsa dancer who says surrender. Your body doesn't surrender because you're told. But when you have a man who really knows what he's doing and he can guide you and he knows all the steps, your body just goes, oh, it just surrenders, and it is the biggest bliss ever to feel like you can surrender, right? And that's a choice. It's not a disempowered, like, oh, I'm a woman, so I have to do this thing. It's a beautiful choice, and I think a beautiful gift. I think the most beautiful gift I can give to my partner is my surrender, but he kind of has to earn it. It's a two-way thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm actually wanting to work on creating a new word. So my Christmas vacation is going to be studying linguistics to come up with another word for surrender, because it just that when we use that word, we already have to break through the connotations of war, of enemy, of weakness, of submission, of powerlessness. And I want a word that encompasses trust and confidence and power and empowerment, because you cannot surrender from a place of weakness. That would be submission, as in the way that we're talking about this. Like, it's only done from a place of having full power, of having full freedom. You can only surrender if you can choose, I want to surrender or I don't. Anything other than that is a submission. So if there's no choice, it's not a surrender.
Exactly. Well, we could use the word melt because that's how it feels in the body, right? I
Yeah.
melt. If
I
you know
melt, I
move,
follow.
if you
Yeah.
can guide me across the dance floor, I melt in your presence.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful. I know when because I was like, I was very strong in my masculine. And when I started to learn about femininity, it was a difficult transition. Like, I kind of went down kicking and screaming. But when I got onto the other side, I remember speaking to some of my old friends, and they were like, well, how have you, what's different? And I was like, oh, I've learned to surrender. And they kind of looked at me and they're like, oh God, she's crossed over. And I was like, but it's so amazing. Like, as much as I love my masculine side, there is such a deeper satisfaction and fulfillment that comes with me and my feminine, and my partner dancing and playing in the masculine.
There's some beautiful words coming in here: to hand over, to allow, and to release the reins of control. And I think that's very beautiful because that's kind of it, right? Like we can have our own masculine, like you said, and we can have it momentarily. And like you and I, there was a whole period of our lives where we were running the masculine because we didn't feel safe to be in the feminine. For me, for myself, my journey was that I actually became physically sick from that. I developed a cyst in my ovary that they were going to do surgery on. And when I was doing inquiry and healing, I was a total aha moment of like, I'm running masculine energy and I'm afraid to be in the feminine. And I cut off that beautiful, soft, feminine part of me because I'm scared of it. So that was the beginning of my journey into the feminine and I healed the cyst. As soon as I made that choice, it actually left my body. So I think it's like these words that are putting in the comments are brilliant, of like handing over and allowing. It's like, actually we see so many women are like in control of their lives, running their own business, fully successful, going to the gym, like everything's under control, and yet there's a deep unhappiness because physiologically, and it is a physiological thing, although a man can also be in the feminine. Physiologically, when you think of being pregnant and developing a baby, like we physiologically want to feel safe and held so that we can allow our body to go through that process. So there is a physiology that many people would like to deny, but there is a physiology, and there are hormones, and there is something about being born in a woman's body, finding fulfillment for many. I've got to be careful of my words here. in having that surrender, section, both in the bedroom and also beyond, right? Because it's not going to happen in the bedroom until it happens in life and in the rest of the relationship.
And this is one of the things that I teach in my courses too, is about how these hormones are engaging in our body, or like, and how they work with it. So like when I do this interaction with my partner, it's producing this hormone in me and that hormone in him. And similar, like the same action has different hormonal effects on our body, because like, yeah, I mean, there's so many different lectures that I have on those different topics.
Tell us a little bit. Tell us one action on one hormone. That's a great topic.
Okay. Get me started. I want to tell you three, but okay. Let's go for one. Like, so one is women, let's go our stress levels. So when we both have stress, when cortisol is high in a woman's body, the way to bring it down is by putting oxytocin up. And so being able to talk with your partner is a really good way, but she needs to feel heard. So then I coach the men on, if you want to help your woman to get into her feminine and to relax at the end of the day, ask her about her day, and then how to engage more. Because sometimes when it's like, how was your day? They did, some of the men I coach on like how to pull out more so that she can really get it all out. Because the more that she talks and the more she feels heard, her oxytocin goes up. And when he's sitting there in the listening and he's helping her to de-stress, then he is providing something, and he feels like, oh, like I'm helping her, I'm solving her problem, she's got stress and I'm bringing it down. And that will increase vasopressin in him. And vasopressin is one of the main male hormones. So it's similar to testosterone. And then, but if it's the other, and same with, if we've got a lot of emotions going on, we can often feel better by talking them out. Whereas men, when they've got a lot of emotions, then their estrogen is going to be higher. And if they talk, the estrogen is going to increase. And in order for their cortisol to come down, their testosterone needs to go up. And so they need to go into their cave, get some alone time, center themselves, process their emotions that way, and then come and share it. And so it's going to have different effects. And if he starts processing his emotions in the midst of it, then that's going to increase his estrogen. And if the woman's on the receiving, supporting end of it, it increases her vasopressin, which is increasing her testosterone. So it doesn't nourish either of them being on the giving or the receiving end of that in the same way.
So the best foreplay, man, are you listening? The best foreplay is to ask how she feels. And it's so true.
Yes.
Like, so many men know how to get a woman, all turned on in bed. Well, it starts on the couch with a cup of tea and how was your day? And then she's already melting. If you're really listening, she already starts melting and opening up, and then the hormones are going in the right direction.
Yeah, I have heard numerous times, and I have said it myself, of how a good conversation turns me on. I can literally feel it in my yoni. Like my yoni will start to get wet and pulsate when I'm in a good conversation.
Absolutely. So. Yeah.
And oxytocin, like we need to build that oxytocin before going into lovemaking, because we will feel more pleasure and have deeper orgasms. And oxytocin is built with no agenda. Like if you want to have affectionate touch, that can build oxytocin, as long as it doesn't have an agenda of leading to sex, because that won't build it ahead of time.
Yeah, this is, I've been watching this documentary on Netflix. I'm sure you have too. Everyone's watching this Love Sex Goop. And it's so beautiful to see Tantra brought to, out into the mainstream, and seeing how, what I noticed is how many couples, a man's like, she doesn't like sex and I want to have sex. And then the therapist is going, here, just drop the agenda and just stroke her and get a feather and, basically stimulate the oxytocin. And then he's like, whoa, she's a really sexual woman after all. So love, sex, and goop. So, this is really brilliant to see how Tantra, things we've been studying in Tantra are finally starting to come out, because, pornography has not really been teaching anything that works, mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way to turn a woman on has everything to do with outside of the bedroom and throughout the day, like sending those sweet messages, like letting her feel seen and heard, leaving her a little love note, like, buying her a rose. And women work in a way where it's like one rose is the same as 12 roses. So if you want to get 12 roses, my advice is to do it once a week. So one rose one week, then another one, because then you just keep getting points and it lands in her in that way. And just when she feels really seen and heard and adored and nourished throughout, and also through the communication. So a lot of women will connect intimately through communication, and it opens them to want to make love. Not everybody, like there's some couples where the woman will connect more through sexuality. That's going to then open her to communication.
Yeah. Did you know there was a study done that when a woman looks into a red rose, her vagina secretes more juices? Yeah, it physiologically opens a woman's vagina to have a red rose. By the way, guys. Yeah. Amazing.
I'm gonna record, go like clip that, sweetheart. He's very good with getting me flowers.
We're giving you all the good tips. So let's talk a little bit about men. We're talking about female surrender, and I'm sure there's lots of men here who are like, yeah, I want my woman to surrender. But let's talk about like the other side of like how it feels as a man to be trusted, right?
Shashi, the interviews that I've been doing, like even just starting to that question, the way that it moved me, like I've been interviewing men about, what does it do for you when you feel needed by a woman? They're like, if I don't feel needed, I don't, like, what's my point of being in this relationship? And not a codependency kind of need, but just like, I want to serve a purpose in her life. And when I was even asking, because I was asking all of these men who were like really conscious men, I'm like, I'm curious. I want to talk to men who haven't yet really reached their king. Like they're not necessarily somebody where they're at that stage yet that a woman wants to surrender to. So I've been interviewing men like that. And I interviewed a man where I was saying, like, how does it go for you when, your woman will follow you? And he has no concept of masculine and feminine. He's like, yeah, that's going to make any man feel good. It's going to inspire him. And there were things that he spoke about. He's like, she should never lead blindly. And I need to choose a path that is also preferred for her. And then it brought him to a point of reflection of like, but you know what? I'm not leading myself right now very well. So I'm not leading this relationship. And just that recognition, but he spoke about what it would do and how it would uplift and how it would inspire him. And so like when a woman does surrender and she offers that trust, from my experience over and over again of working with couples, when that man has it, it inspires him to want to be the best version of himself, because it's like, oh my God, she's giving herself to me. I have to cherish this and really take care of this. And I think it really brings out the best.
Yeah, I agree. My partner's name in Dutch actually means of heroes. So I call him my Helden van Helden, my hero of heroes. And I see how he loves to sew. He loves to bring me tea in bed in the morning, for example, which is one of my love languages. And, I just see how he grows a few inches. Like he just loves to support me. And I can be such a free, independent woman, earning my own money, traveling the world. But in relation, and I think that's the key here, is like, I don't need him. I'm not dependent on him. I'm here in Costa Rica without him right now. I had to make my own tea, but it's not as sexy. It's not. and we enjoy that relational side. It brings out the best in him, brings out the best in me. It brings out our sexuality. And so I think it's important for people to see that it's like an artful playing with this polarity, to open our bodies and hearts more to each other, rather than kind of like fixed roles or limitations or neediness, like you say.
Yeah.
Someone's asking here, do we even know if there are masculine and feminine energies? Surely, if we're soul spirits, what do we know about if they are masculine or feminine or both and beyond? What a profound question.
My personal opinion is that our souls, our spirits don't have a masculine and feminine. I think that we shift, but I believe in reincarnation, and I believe that we pass through lifetimes as man and as woman. Um, I know that I do love being in my feminine with my man and his masculine. I also enjoy being in my masculine on my own, but when I'm with my man and we play that dynamic, I enjoy it. I know he enjoys it. I know that when I'm in my masculine, he's like, okay. um, Sometimes just because I've got a lot of intense energy that moves around pretty fast, and he's a more passive type. I mean, but I don't know anything to be true. I just know what works for me and what feels good and opens me and opens my man and creates more intimacy and harmony in us.
I think
What
there
would
has
you
to
say?
I think there has to be something. Well, like I said, I explored being very masculine early on in life because I didn't want to be stuck in the roles that I saw as feminine. But I found that my sexuality disappeared, and I could have done. I could do that. I could have stayed in the army. I did economics and physics. I mean, I was really, but I wasn't deeply fulfilled, and my ovaries, like I said, started to develop sickness. I realized as I started to go back to feminine that I came here to have a female experience, and I came here in a female body, and that there's something physiological in this body longing to have that experience, and that sexually it's much deeper for me to be able to go into that deep surrender. And orgasmically, like, I don't even think what I was having before were really orgasms in my masculine. But what I discovered is by surrendering, what I really loved in learning Tantra was having a man look deep in my eyes while he was touching my body, and like literally like surrendering. So my yoni is opening and the sexual energy is flowing, and I'm looking into his eyes, and his presence is holding me while I surrender into orgasm. And that particular experience together was profound for both of us. Like, although the orgasm would be flowing through my body, he would then start feeling it, and then our lovemaking would be unbelievable, like no other. And so, I also discovered how terrifying that could be. I remember my first cervical orgasm. I felt like I was literally losing every piece of control that was there. I was fully dying. It was such a deep surrender. And that's scary. But I looked in the eyes of my lover in that moment. I felt so much love and presence. And I trust him to the end of the earth. And I still do, even though he's not my partner now. There was so much love. And I surrendered to his loving presence. And together we went into the most incredible, like we were making love for 3 days with only stopping for toilet breaks. It was so unbelievable how powerful it was. So I don't know that I could access such powerful orgasms without that. And I'm not saying it's the only way, but for sure, for the fulfillment in this body in this lifetime, I found that was the way, and that's why I like to teach about it also. To at least explore it. I'm also happy to be in the masculine. Sometimes I drive the scooter and my man is on the back, and I like to give him a moment of surrender. I can really do that if my man needs his moment of surrender. I like to be playful, but I feel that like orgasmically, that masculine feminine is,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't found another way.
I can second so much of what you just said from my own experience, and to speak about it from the man's perspective too is like a lot of men that I've been working with, I have heard too many times of like, thank you for giving me permission to be masculine again, because it's something that, in this confusion of integrating the masculine and feminine, which I am all for, some men are getting lost in it and they're going too far into the softness or too far into the emotions and the compassion, and they're losing that masculine polarity in it. And so then when it's like, I will coach them to coming back and how to do that, how to lead with their masculine with an integrated feminine. instead of leading with their feminine and losing their masculine. And
Yes,
that's
that's a good phrase. I just want to pause and say that again. It's a leading with the masculine with the integrated feminine. It's so important to have that integrated feminine. It's what we're seeing in the
yes.
world right now is masculine leadership without any integrated feminine. There's a lot of global leaders that are not in touch with their feelings and do not feel into the vulnerability of the people they are leading. There's a complete, block. And that can happen in relationships. A man that's like leading, do this, bitch, and do this and do that. That is not healthy masculine because he's not in touch with his own feelings. And more importantly, he's not feeling into hers, because if he can't feel into his, he can't feel into hers. And then we get that really ugly masculine that people call the toxic masculine. And so that statement you just made of leading in the masculine with an integrated feminine, that's the piece there. That is what the world needs. It's not only what like the individual woman needs. Our world desperately needs that right now from our leaders.
One of my clients is a CEO, and he has such a beautifully integrated feminine, and it's what has gotten him to the point to where he is in his success, which he's incredibly successful. But it is because he has that integrated feminine that allows him to have the kind of power that he has, because he has it with people, not over people. And yet he is still like very much in the lead, but it is in such a collective way. And I love seeing the way that he leads. It's really touching.
And again, back to the salsa dance floor, you can learn a lot here. There, when you're with a man that doesn't feel into your body and he's just like, right, we're going this way and this way, all that happens is your body goes into resistance against it, which is happening politically right now, right? Your body goes into resistance because you're not being felt into. And so you can fight, walk away, or submit, but you can't surrender. And people are going through that so much politically, like fight, submit, or get out of this country. And yet when a man comes along who's guiding and leading while feeling into your body, then he's guiding what serves your body best. Then you hit the place of true leadership. And that's what we're all longing for from our political leaders. It's like, feel into us, the people, when you're making your policies, feel into our happiness and expansion, and not just getting off on your own power trip. And so I think it's so important to unravel all of these topics so that we can, I think globally, both personally and globally, we need to reclaim the healthy masculine right now. And a great place to start is in our personal relationships, and that will ripple out into businesses. And we really need to get political leaders into Tantra. Justine, we need to get the political leaders.
Let's do it. We can do it. We've got our masculine. We can go out there. We can tap into it. We are very much women who lead with our feminine with a strong integration of our masculine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we can do it. I used to have a workshop called Change the World One Relationship at a Time. And it was a relationship workshop. But it was change the world. I'm on a mission.
So we've got a few minutes left. If any more questions are coming from the guys here, or from the women, of course, please feel free to add them into this discussion so that you have my vote. That's good. Oh, believe me, on many of our women's workshops, we've just imagined if tantrikas got into the White House and like really showed the beautiful surrendered feminine, so that the masculine can remember, not just be caught in a power trip, but remember that the beauty of power is to serve those that you hold. That actually it's a paradoxical. We think power is like all 100% yang, but there's a yin hidden within it, which is, the Tao Te Ching always said the king is actually serving everyone. And that concept of being the leader that's serving those that you're leading by helping them to surrender, by honoring and respecting their vulnerability and treasuring it, that's sadly very, very lost in a lot of our understanding around power and masculinity.
Yeah. And this is a big thing of what I work with the men, is like getting to that place to where what like your mission is and your purpose, and to be connected to that, because then you can be of service and you feel fulfilled and inspired to give your gifts to the world. And it's not something that you're just consumed with the individual self of like, I want money for me or this or that, but there is when you're acting from a place of purpose, then it inspires you to be of service. And I think that that is so important to help men to connect to their purpose and their mission, is a really important part of connecting to their masculinity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a question here. How can I ignite the felt sense of truth and trust in my partner? Yeah.
God, I love that question. Thank you for that. Thank you for being a man that asked that question. So so she needs to feel safe. Like I would say, like she needs to feel safe. She needs to feel heard. She needs to feel understood. And so learning skills around empathy and like really hearing the feedback that she's giving. Like sometimes when women are giving feedback, forget women, like sometimes when somebody is getting feedback, we can get defensive and we don't really hear and feel and see what's being said. And we don't see what's going on behind the words, and seeing and hearing beyond the words is really important to be able to really get in touch and create a container of where she feels seen, sometimes even beyond where she can see herself. And so having the skills of empathy and being able to do that is something that I think, like when my man can see me better than I can see myself, and when my man puts me in my place, like it builds a deeper sense of trust. But he needs to do it from a place of center and not reaction, because then I can trust him. If he's reacting and he is still putting me in my place and his point is still valid, it's harder for me to trust because it's coming from a more of like an emotionally loaded defensive place. When he says it from a place of center and I can see that he's present with me and he feels me and he's doing it because he knows that this is a service of love and this is what serves my growth and that we both are committed to this and we've made that agreement, then he has all of me in that. So, I mean, that was a short answer, but I break that one down into like multiple lectures of how to do that, of just like how to hold her in her emotions too, because, you know, right now women are predominantly the ones who are investing in personal development and spirituality. Even my boyfriend, who's studying traditional tantric texts and working with, you know, professors in this, there's mostly women in that course. And so a lot of women have the tools around how to be with emotions and conscious communication. And in a lot of arguments, it can be the women sometimes that are holding that kind of space. And so for men to get these tools and to hold that space, and that's something that I've been working with couples. And I've had men be like, yeah, she holds the space when we go into conflict. Like she brings us back. And so he was really inspired to want to learn how to do that, because he could feel like if I can hold her in that way. And it was something that happened between my partner and I. And I remember at one point being like, I would love for you to, like, you know, when things get off track, for you to bring us back. And my God, he does that. And like, that doesn't mean I relinquish my responsibility to hold my center and be accountable, but I love it when he does. And so developing these skills to be able to hold yourself and hold her emotions, her unconsciousness, and to be able to strengthen your root and be present and to hold consciousness, I would say, in short.
I really resonate with that. I remember when my partner started learning communication skills. I don't know from which workshop, but just like how sexy it is when suddenly when there's conflict and he would be like, okay, repeating back what he's hearing, you know, just using tools. You know, then it'd be like, oh, wow, he's not just diving in to the conflict. He's suddenly holding and helping us to process through things. And my whole body can soften into that. So, and also another answer to the question that you mentioned earlier, I'm going to highlight that again. You also said to build trust, a man needs to be able to lead himself. You said that earlier in the conversation. And I think that's a big piece as well. Like, back to the salsa dancing, if a guy hasn't learned the steps and can't do it, you know, you can't surrender to him. And it's really a metaphor for life. If he's learned how to hold space for himself, if he's bringing some level of lucidity and self-awareness and, you know, and he can lead his own life, then, you know, more and more he can lead yours. When you want that.
Which again brings me back to why it's so important for a man to get in touch with his purpose. And it doesn't need to be his purpose that he's going to live for the rest of his life, because that is shifting and changing. But like, what is my mission for now? Like, what is driving me? What are my values? What are my principles? Because when he has those things to root himself and he's got a direction, it's okay if it's going to change. Like, I feel like sometimes people hold back from committing to something because they think it's forever, but that thing of committing is what propels our growth and propels us into the next level of ourselves.
Absolutely. There's a question here about teens. Teens are bombarded with the rule of getting consent, but they're not given the language. I'm working on a collection for teens and I'm starting interviews. Any suggestions? I think this all applies for teens, right?
Without giving the, I mean, the wheel of consent would be a beautiful place of how to get that. I love the wheel of consent. There's so much work there of understanding. I mean, if teens had the wheel of consent, like that solves a whole lot of the world's problems right there.
I just interviewed Betty Martin, so you can go and look up that interview on Live Tantra. It's just a couple of weeks ago. Was an interview
And
with
there,
Betty.
yeah, and on her website, there's so much amazing free content, and there's games and exercises. Like, I think that when I've done wheel of consent work, like I've spread out a whole wheel on the floor, and I had people stand in it and speak from the different places of what was going on in them. And then we have the shadow side. And so there's a lot of exercises that you can do. I would really recommend you check out her website because it is full of phenomenal inspiration. And
Yeah.
Don, thank you for doing that work because that's so important.
And I think like when we think of consent, we just think of permission and we make it very small. Like, can I have permission to touch you? But it's so much more than that. It's so much, about opening spaces that are safe to go deep together rather than like, trying to get permission. So I think it's good to explore that. There's another really great question. The part about, as a quote, maybe, which from you, quoting you, Justine, maybe you believe you're giving her what she says she wants, but it never seems like it's good enough. That sentence that you said really resonated with me. And can you provide guidance? What if you're giving to your woman and it doesn't feel like it's ever good enough? What's going on? What can a guy do in that situation?
Okay, so one, I want to give you a little bit of insight into her cycle because there are different things that she needs from you at different phases in her cycle. And when she is in the part before her menstruation, that is a time where she might think that she needs more couple time, but really she needs to be doing more self-time, because like her self-time, her self-soothing self-care time and her time with her girlfriends is going to increase her progesterone. If she does couple time, it's going to increase her oxytocin. And so what can happen sometimes during that phase is women think that they want couple time, but it's not going to nourish them the same way than if they were with their girlfriends or with doing their own self-care and things like that. So learning about her hormones and her cycle and how you can be there for it. And this is knowledge that, like, guys, if you nail this, like, you can, if you get like the right action at the right phase of her cycle, you set yourself up for success for the whole month. And if you miss it, then you're going to be like climbing uphill for the rest of the month. So that's one part of it. And then I would also just have a conversation with her about it. So outside of the cycle thing, because that's some like really good stuff. But then otherwise, like, if so often women ask for something, but they really want something much deeper. And it's not just women. I do work on just getting clear on what you want, but I do find that this is more often work that I'm doing with women of like, they're asking for something on the surface, but they want something so much deeper. And a lot of times a woman's complaint is going to be rooted in a request for love. And a lot of time a masculine complaint is going to be rooted in a request for freedom. And so if there's some kind of complaint, it's not, she's asking to be loved deeper and deeper. In that she wants to be seen, she wants to be held, she wants your presence. So also, if you're giving her something, but you're not fully present in your giving, then the action itself isn't going to do anything. And that's the same in making love. Like if a man makes love to me and he's not present with me, I literally cannot feel him penetrating me. But if a man is present with me, I feel him. And so the presence can like change everything.
Mm-hmm.
That was a couple quick answers, but we could go deeper into all of that.
I totally agree. It's here I'm on a women's group for 5 weeks, and we don't have any men. So we're holding each other. Like last night, we were blindfolding each other and feeding each other chocolates. You know how it goes. But we also then get a bit of experience of how it is to be in the masculine, with a woman. So I've learned a lot from this, and I totally agree. It's not always askable, but actually, if you learn to watch for surrender, then if physiologically, then you know the way. And if you notice a moment a woman's body contracts and you just pause, you don't pull away, you don't keep going, you just pause and hold her and you're like, I see you and you're safe. And then her body relaxes again. That's when she feels so deeply met. So also like reading the feedback of your woman's body is, such a big part of it.
Yeah.
And Justine, you are teaching men, right? I mean, you've been teaching men for 15 years, but right now you're putting together a group for men who want to go deeper, right? You want to talk about that?
Yes, I am so excited. So running an all men's program, which I am absolutely delighted about. And in it, we're going to explore things around like getting in touch with purpose and values and masculinity and really rooting in your presence. And I'll be giving you practices for that. And then throughout the program, also, it's going to be going into the understanding the differences of the masculine and feminine. So I'm going to break it down on the hormones in the body, and as well as the structure of your brain, and then how our different interactions and engagements serve us and affect us in different ways. I run a women's program that's kind of the counterpart to this. So this is Lead Your Love. Lead. And then the women's program is Adored. And with so many of the things when the women were learning about the hormones, it was like, oh, well, now I understand. It's like it brought that why in for something that could explain what they were feeling. And I think that just really helps to bring that into this dynamic. And so things of how to really nourish yourself and nourish your masculinity, and ways in which this is getting lost because of society, because of busy lives, because of our 50-50 kind of relationships. And there's some fundamental things that men need for their male body to be able to really nourish that and support that. So those are things that I'll be going into, as well as how to understand the feminine, like how to understand her emotions and how to be with her, how to read beyond the words, how to hold her, how to make her feel safe and trusted. So that question that came before, I'm going to be unpacking that in a very big way. So that will be there. And then also like how to process, helping men to like have the tools around how to process emotions, because this is something that I feel is really new in the last 5 years. And so like a lot of women didn't have this. Like I work with a lot of coaches and therapists, and they still don't know how to process their emotions. Like was just learning this recently. And men are like doubly against like not having this information because they were programmed to be cut from their emotions. And so now they're being told to connect to their emotions. And a lot of time they're being told to do it from in the feminine way. And there's a different way that men do it. And so I'll be going to that of like how to connect with your emotions, how to do deep work, because if you don't clear your triggers and clear your wounds, you can't be conscious and present. You can't hold her in that space. And so how to do these, I'm going to be giving men the tools to do these things so that they can really hold her and lead her and then make her feel safe, seen, and understood.
Someone's asking me privately if there's an age restriction. I think this goes back to the teenage thing. What kind of, I mean, I imagine most of the men you're working with are more adult, but do you have an age restriction or a recommendation?
I think early 20s is going to be where they benefit the most, because I'm going to be talking about like relationship dynamics. But I have somebody who bought her son the course, and I don't yet know how old her son is. So I'm so curious to see. So somebody who's a late teenager, I mean, if they get this information, they are off to a great start. So I think
I
that,
guess it really depends if they're already relating, right? If they're sexually active and in relationships, then they're going to already have an understanding, you know. If, but you're right. If somebody got access to this information even beforehand, it would still be an advantage.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, some of the things like being able to be with your emotions and like tracing your triggers and healing your wounds and all of that. So they may not be at a phase in their life where they're leading and she's surrendering because they're still living with their parents. But
Mm.
they, when that time comes, like, I think that it could really help them in the next phases of their life of really like stepping into their masculine. So I would say, early 20s, but for a mature teenager, I would love to experiment with that. So
Yeah. And on the other end, by the way, there's definitely no limitations because I've worked with couples, I think the oldest was like late 70s and they're still like, wow, oh my God. It's like it's never too late. Like, oh, whole new doors have opened and new pleasure and new levels of relating. So there can be a bit of a sense of like, oh my God, if only we'd learned this like 40 years ago.
yeah,
But still, it's also never too late, even if a couple have been together for a long time. Things can be turned around like this. And that's something I love about doing couples work is like, just because you've been following some kind of paradigm, which could either be the old school masculine, feminine, like roles without any feeling in it, or it could be that mostly it's a neutralizing of becoming like good friends and the sex kind of dies out. Either way, it's never too late to start exploring these realms. And I just see miracles happening to relationships when people start
yeah,
to explore these realms.
yeah, yeah. Agreed. I mean, I've worked with people who are married for, 35 years and they're getting into this for the first time. And I love it. I love that, that wow, it's just so powerful.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many, I work so much with women. There's so many women whose bodies are kind of like bristled up because they've never experienced this. And yet, it's like, oh wow, just to
Yeah.
discover that is a joy at any age.
My body changed when I embraced my feminine. Like it became more soft. My face changed. Like my boyfriend used to call me Wall Street because I would have this like serious look on my face. But when I started to embrace my feminine and have these deeper orgasms, I think both of that happened simultaneously. And I became more feminine in it. Like everything softened.
Yeah. Oh, it's an unbeatable feeling. Well, we've been chatting an hour. We could just go on and on and on. What a great topic to talk about. I'd love, before we wrap up, to hear if there's any kind of conclusions from people who are joining us here live. What takeaways have you got? Anything you're going to take away from here? What was your big aha moment? Or how do how are you feeling at the end of this conversation? Are you feeling like triggered? Are you feeling excited? Is this something that, yeah. So if all of you live would like to put a word or two in the chat, we would love that from you. If he can't hold the space, it hits a nail for me. Yeah. So that's from a woman. We often have to do it all. Yeah, so that's a woman sharing. Exactly. If we have to do the masculine, yeah, that's quite a big cry of like, please come, hold us.
Yeah. And then, there's two sides of that. Like a lot of the work that I'll do with women in the Adored program is pulling back from doing it all because it's hard to sometimes even navigate that and like give that space for the man to step in. But sometimes it's like, it's uncomfortable to give that space because we've trained them that we're going to do it all. And it's a dynamic that I've worked with many of my clients on. And then it's also about like, the men, another quality to go back to that answer before is like to be reliable, like to so that she knows that you're going to follow through and she can trust you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I've shared in here the link. I'll just put it again to your to this program if you want to check it out. And you're offering a coupon there as well for all of the Live Tantra followers. So thank you for offering that. And yeah.
And just a little note on this course, like I'm going to be offering like 3 months of curriculum in 3 weeks. So it's going to be very intense. They'll have access to the videos for long term, but it's more, I just wanted to create it. And I wanted to have some men in there with me while I'm doing that. So I'm offering the course like pretty much 50% off to go into this intensive. I'm so touched and inspired by how many men have signed up for it. It was way more than I thought I was going to have in this, but it's going to be a 3-week intensive. And some of them, like, you're probably not going to get through all of the content in that time, but I will also be doing coaching in the Facebook group. And then we're going to have group coaching calls. So there's going to be so much of me that you're going to get on top of tons and tons of video material. So like the list that I have of all the lectures I want to give, I'm trying to imagine how that's humanly possible to do in 3 weeks, but I'm committed.
We've got the comment, listening to you all is making my body go softer, recognizing it all. That's so wonderful. It's so great. And I think for the guys, it's such a wonderful opportunity to work with a woman on this topic, so you can hear a woman's perspective, but also a woman like you, Justine, who worked with so many men. So you're really a good bridge who can speak on behalf. So, and a little call, then we've got a call out, like, where are the tantric men? Come and teach me. I would gladly surrender. So there's a call here, guys. Are you paying attention? There's a call out from a woman here. She's ready for you. Learn the tools. She's waiting. Ah, that's so lovely. Thank you all. Are you excited, guys? I'm looking at who I can see. I see some smiles. Yeah, I've got some thank yous coming through here privately. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for this inspiring. Thank you for giving me permission to be a man. Yes, absolutely. There's some very important healing to do in this topic, and yeah, I'm glad that we're all showing up to do this work here together. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks for all your great work. We will post this as a replay. So, and guys, if you want to share it with your friends, then do, or women, if you want to share it with your friends. And yeah, maybe even some sons, nephews, some of the younger generation are also wanting to hear this. So we will put it as a replay on Live Tantra. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's so great to chat across, I think, 12 hours apart or something. So, and thank you to everybody who's joined us here live. I really enjoy these conversations when we have the comments and the questions. It's so fun to be sharing with you all. So I hope you've learned something of value, something that will bring a great gift to your life. And thank you, Justine, for doing this beautiful work.
Thank you for all that you create the space for. You're amazing.
Just before I end, you're also going to be teaching in our Tantric Sex Symposium, right? Ta-da!
I am, yes.
So that's coming up in 4 weeks. After I've finished my training here, we're going to do a Tantric Sex Symposium. So please mark it in your calendars and make space for that. And yeah. Thank you all so much for being part of this community where we are learning how to love ourselves and each other better and better, and have more pleasure in our lives. This is what it's all about. Thank you, and see you soon.